Information shared on the following program is for general information purposes only. It does not constitute legal, tax, investment, or other advice, nor is it intended to recommend any particular investments, products, or financial instruments. Always seek advice from your financial advisor, attorney, or accountant with regard to investment, legal, or tax questions.
Is it really better to give than it is to receive? And if so, how much and when should we give? Well, let's find out.
Welcome to the only show in the country dedicated to helping savers worry less about money, the Worry-Free Retirement, with your host, nationally recognized retirement specialist and four-time author, Tony Walker.
One of the more frequent questions I receive on a daily basis is this one. Tony, how much should I give back to myself and to my family? And here's the real kicker to this question, and when should I give it? Well, as someone who, like you, is a saver as well as a consumer, I can certainly relate to this question because I too have often wondered aloud as to when is the best time to give money to myself and to my loved ones and those I care about, especially given the fact that we don't know what tomorrow might bring and when we're going to take our last breath and, of course, leave all this stuff behind. So to truly answer this question, as well as feel good about the answer to it, you have to look at life and money differently than the way maybe our parents and grandparents did, and instead take on this philosophy I created called Live Well, Die Broke. It's a philosophy I created after meeting in person with over 15,000 savers, and in many cases watching their lives play out and not using and enjoy this money before it's too late. Which is why today we're going to explore why it is always better to give, and more importantly, when is the best time to give it away. So let's get started. Well, welcome folks to the Worry-Free Retirement, and yes, I am that little man in the sweater vest, gift-giving specialist and fiduciary, Tony Walker, and today we are going to address one of the most interesting phenomenons of money, and it is this discovery I made years ago about giving. But before we share the results of my findings on how much to give family members and when, let me introduce three folks in the Worry-Free Retirement Studios who know how to give their time to the production of this show each week. America's favorite financial sidekick, Mr. Aaron Orander, Louisville, Kentucky's most laid-back graphics artist, Mr. Derek Hudson, and finally our associate producer, Miss Meek and Mild, Mary Beth Combs. Okay, there you are, retired or maybe nearing retirement, and your main goal is to be sure that you have enough money to live on and perish the thought that the money you've given away doesn't one day run out. Which is why today our topic will show you how to do just that, how much you should give to your family, and when. So I'm Tony Walker, you're watching the Worry-Free Retirement. You stay tuned, I'll be right back. Have you recently retired, been laid off, or offered a pension buyout? Has the company you work for moved, been acquired, or closed its doors forever? And finally, do you have a 401k with a previous employer you'd like to move to safer territory? Then take advantage of this opportunity to move your 401k or lump sum pension to Tony Walker Financial. Let's meet in person to discuss your retirement options. Log on now to TonyWalkerFinancial.com to schedule your free, no obligation appointment. Let us help you today. In the world of gift giving, there are basically three people or institutions that you and I will give money to, and as we'll see, the last category of those receiving our gifts is not the one we need to give money to, but in the end, we'll probably get most of it. First and foremost, the person that should be getting the most gifts is ourselves, right? I mean, isn't that why you work, so that you can have money to live on? So let's not fool ourselves here. We work first and foremost to take care of ourselves. The second source of those who we might wish to give money to would be our loved ones, our spouse, our kids, our grandkids, and other close family members, as well as organizations such as churches or charities. Both of these two are very noble and quite deserving of whatever gifts we might decide to give them. But then there's a third group of folks that we will give our money to, and that's the insurance companies, Wall Street, the banks, the government in the way of taxes, and finally, heaven forbid, possibly the nursing homes. So whether we want to admit it or not, you will give your money to someone else, and in some cases, whether you like it or not. So before we look at our options today for giving more of our money to ourselves and those we love and care about, I think we need to step back in time to understand why past generations didn't really think as much about giving money to others until after they died. Take my granddad, for instance. In this example, he retired in 1978 after 43 years with a phone company. My granddad never had a lot of money to give. That's because back then, you worked until retirement and turned those two sources of income into what we call mailbox money. First, it would be called the employer-provided pension plan, and second, something called Social Security. Again, two things Granddad called
mailbox money.
Now, in those days, most savers didn't have a lot of money outside these two sources of income, and if they did, it was usually stockpiled over at the local bank and never spent or given to others because that generation was afraid to give it or spend it away. That's because back then, that generation saw the ravaging effects of a depression, and they were fearful, therefore, to give any money away and usually left it upon their deathbed. Most savers either hid the money in the backyard or in many cases, again, just left it in the bank. But today, this is not your granddad's retirement. Today, we have to live by something I created called Live Well, Die Broke. In other words, realizing that you can't take this stuff with you, why not spend and enjoy more of it on yourselves and those you care about as opposed to giving it to others who you'd rather not see have it? Today's retirement looks much different than it did for those folks of previous generations. Assuming you agree with this notion of using and enjoy your money, yes, even maybe giving it to loved ones now rather than later, let's take a look at why right now could be the most favorable time to give money away based on what we call the gift tax law. So let's go through this. Let's imagine there's two spouses here, and under the current law, a husband and wife can currently give $16,000 per person. So let's do the math to see how much money we can give to loved ones exactly tax-free each and every year. So if we take the husband and wife, the annual exclusion is $16,000 per person per spouse. Well, in this case, we have 2 children and 2 grandchildren. So we multiply $16,000 by the 4 recipients of those gifts, which for the one spouse is $64,000. The other spouse could do the same thing, so that's another $64,000. So that means in just 1 year, if you so choose to do that, you could give away $128,000 in this example, tax-free. So now that's something called the gift tax laws. That's the amount of money you can give away tax-free while you're alive. Well, what are the laws regarding death taxes and how much you're going to have to pay to the government after you die? Well, the answer to that question is actually going to surprise you, but there's a warning shot over the bow that says we better act now in case things change later on. I'm Tony Walker. Good stuff coming up. Stay tuned. Are you nearing retirement, and does your employer offer you a pension? Do you realize that with interest rates going up, the value of your pension will be going down by as much as a 25% loss in value? Don't let this kind of money get away from you. Take action now before your lump sum pension loses value. Log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com or give us a call at 877-499-9255. Welcome back to the Worry-Free Retirement, and we start off our segment with a Tony in the Trenches all the way from a gentleman in Virginia, and he asked the following. Tony, I hear you make the statement that the financial world is more excited to get our money than they are to give it back. What do you mean by this, and can you provide us an example? Well, yes, I can. Actually, we have a lot of situations come up where we are rolling over a 401k to our process at Tony Walker Financial. In many cases, especially in the Louisville office, after people meet with me, ready to do business, then I'll take them down the hall to see my favorite son-in-law and fellow fiduciary Trey Juergens. And recently, since he's the one that has to deal with a lot of these rollovers, He had this to say about a client who was trying to move their money over to us. So let's take a look and see what Trey found out. Well, good morning, Trey.
Good morning. Yeah, this one was a doozy. So during the onboarding process, I help a lot of our clients here in Louisville get the money from their current custodian, whether it's an IRA, 401k, and move it into the plan that we've laid out for them. Of course, we're looking for more use, flexibility, and control of their money, and this was far from that. So when we first reached out, I had to call the original custodian. This client had a statement. It showed where the money was. But when we called that custodian, it was actually in the process of migrating over to a new plan. We had to call the employer to just verify that it was legitimate, and they would be receiving a packet that explained the process of a new blackout period, which was 2 to 4 weeks from him even being able to move the money where he wanted to. It may or may not affect the current distributions he was receiving from that plan. And it was really just a big question mark. So we had to call the new custodian. That was a couple weeks after the initial phone call, giving them some time for that blackout period. The new custodian, of course, had some information, but not all. So we had to wait another week. Once we called back, we had to call the employer to just better understand what was going on, when the blackout period would occur. We called the new accounting firm. All information was moved over. However, they had made an error in the migration of his data, and his address was incorrect in the system. So in helping him try to identify himself to get clearance to the account, his address was wrong. So then he had to go through a process of identifying himself. It was going to require mailed paperwork, notary, all that. However, we bypassed that and called the accounting firm to correct the error. They were able to notify the new custodian, and then we were able to do a rollover call. We found out the accounting firm didn't update his address, so we had to go back through the same process 48 hours later. We finally got the ability to get that money moved over, a rollover into Charles Schwab, where he wanted the funds to go, and lay it out into the plan that we had for him. And once we did that, we had a conference. They were asking him questions about colors of vehicles that he owned in the 1990s. And finally, we got the authorization, and we had to scan and upload an image of his driver's license into an online secure portal. So about 12 hoops to jump through in order to help this gentleman in the onboarding process. But understanding that we get to do this every day and understand the ins and outs, most people have to worry about retiring one time. We've got the expertise to help in this area.
Yeah, and I'm so fortunate to have you in the office, and of course Wes in the Lexington offices of Fiduciary, and of course Heather in the Bowling Green office. So thank you for all you do. Obviously, folks, hopefully it's not going to be this much trouble to move your 401k over, but this is exactly why you need a trained local retirement specialist who, as Trey said, is there to provide use, flexibility, and control of your money. Well, thanks again, Trey, and you make it a good day.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, back to the content of our show. Let's imagine that you and me are politicians, and we're concerned as to how this country is going to pay back over $30 trillion in debt. Where might be the best place to go find some tax dollars which to pay this money back? Well, since pensions are all but extinct and most young people don't have a lot of money that can be taxed, the one place that is yet to be mined for tax dollars, that's right, your tax-infested 401k plan. You see, it is currently estimated that in 401k plans, 403b, thrift savings accounts, lump sum pensions, there is well over $30 trillion of money sidelined in these pre-tax accounts that have yet to be taxed. Again, in one fell swoop, possibly our friends in Washington could raise the taxes on this money. Let's take a look at the current tax rates on your income, which ironically are some of the lowest in our history, and many of you are not taking advantage of this. Now that we can see these tax rates are low, let's go back in time and look at the history of the income tax rates. And we see, look at this, in the 1950s and 60s, you could possibly pay as much as 90% of your money in the way of taxes. Now, could they change the tax laws? Who knows? But the point is, in the past, taxes were very, very high. Well, today, believe it or not, when we talk about something called death taxes, a husband and wife can actually leave $12 million of money at death with no taxes, which doesn't include most of you watching this show. So a lot of you shouldn't be worried about this now, But again, just like income taxes, what if Congress changes their mind on what we call the estate tax exemption and goes back into the 1980s and 1990s when I was doing estate planning, and it looks something like this? So we're going to go back to prior inheritance tax laws. Again, do we think they'll go back to this? I don't know. But when I did estate planning, we went out and tried to find people that had estates of at least $1.2 million. Now, why would we do this? Well, let's go through this, Derek. He's helping us with the graphs here. So each spouse basically could leave at death up to $600,000. And in today's dollars, that's not much money. A lot of you have much more than $600,000 when you include your home, 401k plans, and other assets. So what we would do to take advantage of each spouse's what's called exemption, we would set up something called an AB trust. Now this had to be done properly, because if you didn't do it, and let's say both spouses die, you would have lost one of those exemptions. So in other words, the first spouse dies, $600,000 goes into what's called the marital trust, which would be used by the surviving spouse for income and would be sheltered from estate taxes. But then you would have to set up something in your will that would establish what's called a credit shelter trust. Because back then, $600,000 of asset equaled a credit, a tax credit of $192,000. So in other words, let's keep going, Derek. If this was set up properly, the first $1.2 million you left, again, we're going back in time, was tax-free. But here's the real rub. Anything above $1.2 million, now think about this, folks. Again, I'm not saying this will happen, but if you're a politician looking for tax dollars, all you got to do is change these laws back to the way they were in 1980 and 1990, and basically anything over $1.2 million back then, the taxes, this does not include income taxes, the estate taxes started at 37% and could go as high as 67% with federal and state estate taxes. Now, guess what? For those of you that have a 401k plan, assuming the estate taxes go back to that and they raise income taxes, you're still going to have to pay income taxes on the 401k plan. And while that might be a credit against this, I know this gets complicated, folks, but you need to understand this. This is the kind of stuff that can happen. They could possibly eat your lunch. This is why we're trying to encourage people to think about giving money now, to set plans in motion now while these tax laws are so favorable for using and enjoying your money and gifting it to loved ones now. Oh, incidentally, back when I used to do estate planning, I used to carry around this letter that came from the IRS. Now, this is interesting stuff. Let's take a look at this. This was a gentleman down in Nashville, Tennessee. Some of you down in that area may have remembered him. Apparently, he was a big road contractor or something, or construction guy. His last name was Oman. He died in 1977. Okay, notice it's addressed to the estate of Sturton Oman. That's not a good sign from the IRS. Let's look at what he owed, or his estate owed in taxes, Derek. If we zoom in here, look at this. The tentative tax owed on his estate was $6.5 million, okay? Well, they came in and they gave, that's the unified credit, that's the B trust we talked about. They gave him a credit of $30,000. Also, by the way, he had to pay state taxes, I guess in Tennessee back then, of $1.1 million. So they gave him a credit for that. So his net estate tax, that's the federal tax, was over $5 million. What? Now, I want you to think about this, folks. Again, if we're politicians trying to worry about how we're going to pay off a debt of $30 trillion one day, the money's not going to be there unless we tax the heck out of everybody. How could they do that? Possibly go back to some of these old tax laws and reinstate them. And especially if you've got all your money locked up in 401k plans, folks, there is nothing you're going to be able to do about it. So what is the solution, Tony? What am I supposed to do? Just wait to see if they change the tax laws? Well, I don't think that's the thing to do at all. I think you have to be proactive, think outside the box, and more importantly, get with a trained retirement specialist with more than 38 years who's been around the block a time or two and understands not only taxes, but how to use and enjoy this money before it's too late. Well, how did we do this? We do it through something called the split IRA process. And I think it's worth repeating, because if you're sitting there right now with a bunch of money languishing over in the bank, maybe you've got a 401k, maybe you've got an IRA you've rolled over to a broker or money manager, and they're not doing any planning whatsoever. Folks, it's not about how much money you make, it's how much money you keep. And that's our specialty at Tony Walker Financial. And let me show you how this works. It's really ingenious. What we do as a fiduciary, we're going to, in most cases, split up someone's assets into two buckets or even multiple buckets. The first bucket is our Charles Schwab bucket. Now, why do we use Charles Schwab? Well, first of all, there's some of the lowest fees in the industry. We can get stocks, bonds, mutual funds, CDs. We can get about anything you want, but more importantly, that bucket is what we call our liquidity bucket, so that we can use and enjoy this money before it's too late. And then on the back end, we put annuities, sometimes multiple annuities of different varieties. The purpose of the annuities is what? To make sure principal's protected, to make sure we can refill that bucket on Schwab as you spend and enjoy your money. And here's the real kicker. No other asset can do this but an annuity. To make sure we can set up that beloved mailbox money.
Mailbox money.
And also provide something I call sleep insurance.
Sleep insurance.
So how do we do that? And how does that fit into the whole gift-giving strategy? Well, think about that, folks. As you're getting older in life and aging, you're probably going to spend less money. So the idea is spend more of it now, give more of it away now, but instead of possibly running out of it, we have those annuities on the back end that provide the mailbox money. So if you're looking for a way to get yourself some permission to enjoy this money, to see loved ones enjoy it while you're alive rather than the old way of just leaving it to them after you die, why don't we do this? Why don't you set up a no obligation appointment with me by phone? It's called the free 10-minute fiduciary phone call. And here's all you do. Just log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. You're going to click on that Let's Get Started button, and we will arrange a free phone call with myself. That's right, the owner of the company, to talk to you about your situation. And then if it warrants, I'll be happy to meet with you in person at either our Bowling Green, Louisville, or Lexington, Kentucky offices. So take advantage of this free offer now. Do it today, get on track, and get a plan. Well, what does the Bible have to say about giving? It's going to surprise you in terms of how much you can give and the supply of gifts that are available to you from this God that loves us so much. I'm definitely going to need a cup of coffee for this. I'll be right back. With the uncertainty of the stock market, our nation's debt spiraling out of control, and inflation running rampant, now may be the best time to consider moving your 401k to safer territory. My name is Tony Walker, and for over 38 years I've made it my life's mission to help savers worry less about money, and I want to help you too. To speak with me at no cost or obligation, why don't you log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com or simply call the toll-free number on your screen. Wondering how much money you'll need to retire? Probably a lot less than you think. I'm retirement specialist Tony Walker, and for the past 36 years, I've helped thousands of savers determine when to retire and how much money they'll need in retirement, and I can help you too. To meet in person at no cost or obligation, let me invite you to log on right now to TonyWalkerFinancial.com or call the toll-free number on your screen. We look forward to talking with you soon. The late, great Charles Spurgeon once said this regarding his attempts to interpret the many mysteries found in God's Word. He said, "I am not trying to convert men to my opinions, but rather I wish only to share my observations about them." And nowhere can I second the thoughts of Mr. Spurgeon in the area of how much we as followers of Jesus Christ should give, and just as importantly, when are we to give it? And while most New Testament believing Christians would quickly point to the tithe as the simple answer to this most difficult of questions, I, like Spurgeon, would like to share my observations about the Old Testament notion of the tithe as compared to the New Testament suggestions of God's free gift-giving spirit as a result of this man Christ by way of a story he shared in the Bible. We pick it up in John chapter 2, where the large crowd at a wedding party has gone through all the wine, and now the social blunder of running out is evident. Not knowing what to do and where to get some more wine on such short notice, Mary turns to Jesus for help. Asking the wine attendants to fill up 6 large jugs with water, Jesus then miraculously turns 150 gallons of water into wine. And not just any old rot-gut wine that one might expect from this free offer. No, as the official wine taster at the party exhorts, the water turned into wine by Jesus is better wine than the other wine they had been serving. You see, in those days, and even today, most people serve up the best stuff first, and then, when they've got you hooked, in comes the rot gut stuff because, well, once you're intoxicated on the world's goods, you won't know the difference anyway. But God doesn't give us anything that's rot gut. In fact, in His economy, the best is always saved for last. You see, when it comes to the power and ability of God to supply our every need, there is no limit to what He can provide, nor how much. And once we accept this truth, our gift giving begins to change from what's in it for me to giving to others without expecting anything in return. Oh, speaking of hosting really large gatherings and not expecting anything in return from the guests in attendance, this year, Tony Walker Financial will host 5 different events solely dedicated to letting our clients know how much we appreciate their business, which is a ton of money and a ton of time and effort to plan and coordinate such events. I guess rather than hosting free dinner seminars and buying complete strangers free steak dinners to get their business, I'd rather spend my money thanking our clients for their business. So where does this free spirit of giving without expecting anything in return come from? Well, it comes by trusting in God to replace what we give. Check it out, what Jesus says in Matthew 6:3, where He says, "Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." He goes on to say in verse 4, we should give alms, that's our gifts, in secret. Why? Because your Father who sees in secret will repay you. In fact, when you give without expecting anything in return, what comes back to you looks something like this in Luke 6:38, which basically means more wine than you could ever imagine consuming. So in the end, Tony, you ask, how much should I give? Well, let's turn to the Apostle Paul for some advice, where in 2 Corinthians 9:7 he says the following, "Give as each one of us purposes in our hearts, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver." And that, my friend, is some cheerful gift-giving news you and I can take to the bank. Amen? Well, how about you? Are you wondering how much you can give back to yourself and to those you love and care about rather than just blindly handing over your money to those you'd rather not give it to at all? Well, I've got a free offer that I don't want you to pass up. It's called the free 10-minute fiduciary phone call. And here's how this works. First of all, to take advantage of this free offer to talk to me, Tony Walker, the owner of the company, all you do is log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. And once there, you're going to click on that Let's Get Started button, whereby we will arrange a 10-minute call with myself to find out if we can be of help to you. If it looks like there's something we can help you with, we'll then arrange a free appointment with myself at either our Bowling Green, Louisville, or Lexington, Kentucky offices. So take advantage of that now. Log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com or call the toll-free number on your screen. Well, next week, we've got an exciting program for you. Guess what? We're going to bring in the old hit show Bonanza and tell you why we at Tony Walker Financial are continuing to keep our hand to the plow. But between now and then, you remember, if all else fails, you be worry-free. Make it a good one.